That night, he put down the microphone and turned to the audience. "I need to tell you something." The laughter stopped. The room went silent. Robin Williams, the man who had spent decades making millions laugh, was about to reveal the truth no one expected to hear. The stage lights felt heavier than usual. 1,500 people sat in the darkness, waiting for the next joke, the next impression, the next burst of genius that had defined Robin Williams for nearly 40 years. But instead of laughter, they were about to witness something far more powerful: honesty. It was October 2013, at a small theater in San Francisco. Robin had returned to stand-up after years away, testing new material, reconnecting with the art form that had launched his career. The show had been going well: classic Robin, voices, characters, rapid-fire observations that left audiences breathless. But then, mid-performance, something shifted. He paused. Not for comedic timing. Not for effect. Just paused. "You know," he said, his voice dropping to a register the audience had never heard before. "I've been thinking about something lately." The crowd leaned forward. This wasn't part of the act. This was real. But what happened next would reveal a side of Robin Williams the world had never truly seen, a truth that had been hiding behind every smile, every character, every brilliant performance. Robin stood there, microphone loose in his hand, staring at a spot somewhere in the middle distance. For a man who had built a career on never stopping, never slowing down, this stillness was almost frightening. "I've spent my whole life making people laugh," he continued, his words measured now, deliberate. "And I'm grateful for that. Truly. But there's something I don't think I've ever really talked about." He looked up at the audience, and for the first time that night, they saw it: vulnerability, raw and unfiltered. "Loneliness," he said simply. The word hung in the air like smoke. The audience didn't know how to respond. Was this part of the show? Would he turn it into a joke? But Robin wasn't smiling. He was just standing there, a man in his 60s, talking to a room full of strangers about the one thing he'd kept hidden for decades. "You can be surrounded by people all the time and still feel completely alone," he said. "Actually, sometimes being surrounded by people makes it worse, because you're performing all the time. You're on. And when you're always on, you start to forget who you are when you're off." The confession came without warning, without setup. It was pure, unscripted truth, the kind that makes audiences uncomfortable because it's so nakedly honest. But Robin wasn't looking for comfort. He was looking for connection. He began to pace slowly across the stage, the way he did when he was thinking, when he was building to something. "I remember being a kid," he said, "and comedy was my way of making friends. If I could make them laugh, they'd want to be around me. And it worked. It worked so well that I never stopped doing it." His voice was soft now, almost conversational, as if he were talking to a single person rather than 1,500. But here's the thing about that: when people only know you as the funny guy, they never really know you. They know the performance. They know the character. But they don't know the person underneath. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful moment of Robin's life is still ahead. The story Robin was telling wasn't new to him. He'd lived it every day for 40 years. But he'd never said it out loud, not like this, not in front of an audience who had paid to laugh, not to cry. "I've had 3 marriages," he continued, his tone matter-of-fact but tinged with something deeper, regret perhaps, or just the weight of experience. 3 incredible women who tried to love me, who did love me. And I loved them. But I don't think I ever let them see the real me. The scared me. The uncertain me. The me that wakes up at 3 in the morning wondering if any of it matters. The audience was completely silent now. You could hear the ventilation system humming, could hear someone shift in their seat 3 rows back. This wasn't entertainment. This was testimony. "Comedy," Robin said, "is a beautiful thing. It connects people. It heals. It brings light into dark places. But for the comedian?" He paused, searching for the right words. "For the comedian, it can also be a shield. A way to keep people at arm's length while making them feel close to you. He stopped pacing and stood center stage, directly under the spotlight. I've been that guy my whole life. The guy who walks into a room and lights it up, who makes everyone feel better, who never lets the energy drop. And people loved me for it. But they loved the performance. And I started to wonder, if I stopped performing, would anyone still love me? The question landed like a stone dropping into still water, ripples spreading outward, touching everyone in that theater. A woman in the third row had tears streaming down her face. A man near the back had his hand over his mouth, as if trying to hold something in. This was supposed to be a comedy show, but it had become something else entirely, a moment of shared human experience, of recognition. Robin noticed the reactions. He smiled, but it wasn't his usual smile, the one that crinkled his eyes and promised mischief. This smile was sad, knowing. I see some of you getting it, he said gently. You know what I'm talking about. You've felt it too. He sat down on the edge of the stage, legs dangling over the side, microphone resting on his knee. It was such a casual gesture, but it broke down the barrier between performer and audience completely. He wasn't Robin Williams, the star. He was just Robin, a guy trying to figure things out. Here's what I've learned, he said, looking up at the faces in the crowd. Loneliness isn't about being alone. It's about not being seen. You can be in a room full of people who adore you and still feel invisible because they're not seeing you, they're seeing what they want you to be. His voice cracked slightly on that last word, and he had to pause to compose himself. The audience waited, patient, present, no longer spectators but witnesses. I've played so many characters, he continued. Mrs. Doubtfire, the genie, Patch Adams, all these people who brought joy and laughter and hope. And I poured myself into them. But sometimes I wonder if I was hiding in them too. If it was easier to be someone else than to be me. The confession was coming faster now, as if once he'd started, he couldn't stop. After shows, I'd go back to the hotel room, and it would be empty and quiet, and I'd sit there thinking, who am I when nobody's watching? Who am I when I'm not making someone laugh? And I didn't always have an answer. But then something happened that would change everything. A moment so simple, yet so profound, it would redefine how Robin Williams saw himself and his place in the world. From his pocket, Robin pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was worn, creased from being opened and closed many times. Someone gave this to me 3 months ago, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. After a show in Chicago. A kid, maybe 16, 17 years old. He unfolded the paper carefully, reverently. He waited by the stage door with his mom. He was nervous, shaking a little. And when I came out, he handed me this and said, "Thank you for saving my life." Robin's hands were trembling as he held the letter. I get a lot of letters. A lot of thank yous. And I'm grateful for every single one. But this one. He paused, collecting himself. This one was different. He began to read, his voice steady but thick with emotion. Dear Mr. Williams, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I needed to write it anyway. 3 years ago, I tried to kill myself. I was 15, and I felt like nobody understood me, like I didn't fit anywhere. I felt invisible. The audience was frozen, barely breathing. Robin continued, but then I watched Dead Poets Society. And I heard you say, Carpe diem. Seize the day. And something clicked. If I was going to die anyway, why not try living first? Really living, not just going through the motions. So I did. I joined the theater club. I made friends. I found my voice. And I'm still here because you reminded me that my life mattered. Robin folded the letter and put it back in his pocket, his eyes wet. That kid, he said, his voice breaking, reminded me why I do this. Not for the applause, not for the awards, not even for the laughter, though I love all of that. I do this because connection is the opposite of loneliness. And if my work can help even one person feel less alone, then maybe I'm not as alone as I thought. The silence that followed was profound. Then, slowly, someone in the back started clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire audience was on their feet, not cheering, not whooping, just clapping, steady and strong, a rhythm of acknowledgement and solidarity. Robin stood up, wiping his eyes with the back of his hand. "I'm sorry," he said, laughing a little through the tears. This wasn't supposed to be a therapy session. But the audience didn't want jokes now. They wanted this real moment, this honest connection. "I guess what I'm trying to say," Robin continued, his voice stronger now, "is that it's okay to be lonely. It's okay to be scared. It's okay to not have all the answers. We're all just doing our best, trying to figure it out as we go. And maybe the bravest thing we can do is admit that we don't have to do it alone." He looked out at the sea of faces, all of them watching him, really watching him, not the character, not the performer, but him. "Thank you," he said simply. "Thank you for letting me be honest with you tonight. Thank you for seeing me." The applause continued as Robin set the microphone down on its stand and walked off stage, not with the usual energy and fanfare, but quietly, peacefully, like a man who had just set down a burden he'd been carrying for too long. Share and subscribe so his story will never be forgotten. Backstage, Robin sat alone in his dressing room, the sounds of the departing crowd muffled through the walls. He pulled out the letter again, read it one more time, and smiled. Not the performer's smile, but a real one, small and genuine. He thought about all the years he'd spent running from silence, filling every moment with noise and laughter and energy because silence felt like death. But tonight, he'd sat in the silence, and it hadn't killed him. Instead, it had freed him. The stage manager knocked on the door. "Robin? You okay?" "Yeah," he called back. "Yeah, I'm good." And for the first time in a long time, he meant it. The next morning, clips from that night's show began circulating online. Not the jokes, not the impressions, but the confession, that raw moment when Robin Williams stopped performing and started being human. The response was overwhelming. Thousands of people shared their own stories of loneliness, of hiding behind masks, of feeling unseen. One comment stood out. "I've been a fan of Robin Williams my whole life, but last night I became a fan of Robin the person." That comment would stay with him. Robin the person. Not the character, not the performer, but the person. The man who got scared, who felt lonely, who didn't always have the answers. The man who was just like everyone else, trying to find his way in a confusing world. In the months that followed, Robin would reference that night often. He'd talk about it in interviews, in conversations with friends, as a turning point. "I stopped hiding," he'd say. "I stopped pretending I had it all figured out. And you know what? People didn't leave. They stayed. They understood. Because we're all lonely sometimes. We're all scared. And admitting that doesn't make us weak, it makes us human." The theater in San Francisco where it happened would later place a plaque commemorating the evening. Not for the comedy, but for the courage. The courage to be vulnerable in front of 1,500 strangers. The courage to say, "I'm lonely, and that's okay." Robin Williams taught the world many things during his extraordinary life. How to laugh at the absurdity of existence. How to find joy in the darkest moments. How to see the humanity in everyone. But perhaps his greatest lesson came that October night when he taught us that it's okay to not be okay, that loneliness is part of the human experience, and that the bravest thing we can do is share our truth with others. Because in sharing our truth, we give others permission to share theirs. And in that sharing, we find what we've been looking for all along: connection, understanding, and the knowledge that we're not alone, not really, not ever. The letter from that teenager stayed in Robin's pocket for the rest of his life. A reminder that his life had meaning beyond the laughter, that his existence had touched someone in a way that mattered, that he had saved a life simply by being honest about his own struggles. And maybe that's the ultimate lesson: we save each other by being real, by admitting we're all just trying to figure it out, by saying, "I'm lonely too, and that's okay." That night, Robin Williams didn't just perform. He connected. And in doing so, he reminded us all that beneath every smile, there's a story. Beneath every laugh, there's a longing. And sometimes, the bravest thing we can do is simply tell the truth.